Here to cover all things crime, history, and politics, we are At the Desk. I'm your host, Ginevra Semprini, and in today's episode, we will be talking about the current United States government shutdown, taking a dive into the life of Jane Goodall, and we will be having a debate about some of America's forgotten amendments. Now come take a seat with us at the desk. Welcome back to ATD. First, it's time to send it over to the politics panel to discuss the government shutdown and Israel's conditions. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Ginevra. After 2 years of hostility, death, and destruction, President Trump was able to lead a peace deal in the Middle East in an attempt to end the Hamas-Israeli war. There were celebrations in the streets as hostages and prisoners were released yesterday. As the hostages returned to their families and aid rolled into Gaza, we are now headed down a long road to ensure peace in this region of the world. While domestically, we are now over a week of government turmoil as neither side of the aisle can agree to open the government. Well, everyone, welcome back. It's good to be back. So let's start with you, Jackson. What are your initial thoughts on this peace deal in the Middle East?
So I'm content for now, but I'm also a little bit skeptical because there's been a lot of ceasefire deals called in the past between Israel and Hamas, Israel-Palestine since 1948 for a very long time now. And I just don't know how long this one's going to last. Now, some of the unique parts of this are that it requires Israel to provide aid to Gaza. It provides, or it calls for a complete military ceasefire, things like that. So I am hopeful that it does stay. But again, I'm just very, very skeptical of how long it will last and when Israel will violate it, or Hamas maybe.
Yep. Vita?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think that this is a step in the right direction, but I don't think that this means that there is going to be peace. I think we're already seeing the repercussions of the vagueness in this ceasefire agreement, and we will continue to do so.
Nothing much said, but a lot of work that needs to be done. Obviously, it's good to see people rolling back into Gaza. It's good to see the hostages free. 20 people returned home. Israel's still waiting on some dead bodies. Still some action at the border. 9 people dead today. A lot of work. Again, the jury isn't out on if this is going to work or not, but you got to commend the Trump administration, to Marco Rubio and all those who, did what they had to do to make sure that this was at least moving in the right direction, get the ball rolling.
Right, and now we look at the entire landscape. We look at Gaza. Already, Hamas has killed 27 people, have had some troubles with militant groups and people revolting. In this agreement, there was no real structure on who is going to be running this land, and there was no real structure on Hamas having to leave. So what are your thoughts on how this should be handled? Who should be overseeing this?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely completely very layered, and I know right now Israeli forces still control 53% of Gaza, which is obviously a very conflicting number. I mean, I think ultimately the Trump administration has had a very heavy hand, and I hope that the Trump administration continues to play a bigger role in creating a sense of peace and doesn't kind of abandon this issue.
The transition is going to be a tough one, specifically because right now, obviously, in Israel, the government under Netanyahu, the Knesset, is not currently very popular with the people. So I think something that needs to be prioritized is both sides, whether that be Gaza or Israel, need to find a way to unite their government with their people, because the problem is on Israel too, with them not being very popular with their government and the government not being popular with them. Obviously Netanyahu facing charges. And then on the other side too, I think it goes without saying, you can't have a group like Hamas governing. It's not going to work. So in a two-state solution, the government has to connect better with the people on both sides of the aisle. This is an issue that both are having right now.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that there really isn't any viable solution right now, if this is going to be a one-state solution, a two-state solution, like all of that is still very much up in the air. So I think that is honestly like one of the first things that needs to be addressed, not only by Prime Minister Netanyahu, but also seeing who's going. I don't think that Hamas should be the group that is governing and deciding for the Palestinian people, specifically Gazans, and that has to be kind of really up there in terms of priority.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we should, you should note here that most Palestinians don't support Hamas. I'm not sure how many Israelis think that, but I know the rest of the world, we know that most Palestinians don't support terrorism, don't support these kind of groups. My concern is that Israeli propaganda within that country might cause them to keep wanting to bomb Gaza despite the ceasefire deal. That is my main concern right now. Also, the vagueness of the deal. There's a lot of loose, kind of like non-consistent things here that I'm a little bit worried about, but I'm really hoping again that somehow, some way they can work it out and Hamas is taken out of power in Palestine, so that way Israel has no excuse to keep doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Now, you just mentioned something which is an interesting point. How do we get Hamas out of Gaza? That is the problem. They are, as we've all mentioned, a terrorist group, and these people that are living there don't want to be led by a terrorist group, but it's much more difficult, much more complex. Who has to be the final say in order to get them out, do we think?
Well, the law of the land right now in Gaza, part of the peace agreement is that police powers are allotted to Gaza, which essentially makes them the government, not Gaza, Hamas, which essentially makes them the government at the moment. But in terms of a rebuild, obviously a lot of people are not in favor of Donald Trump and the Trump administration being in charge of that rebuild, but it's very interesting to see who will actually step up and be able to do it humanely, because the issue of having famine, people without food, is still an issue. A lot of that is, quote, being robbed on its way. Israel says that they're not blocking it. Many people say Israel is blocking it. A lot of people say a third party is involved, but getting food to these people that are now shuffling back in is going to be very difficult.
And I think it's important to talk about the Board of Peace, something that they're talking about creating, and they have Trump actually, many of them, as at least he says, want him to be the head chairman of this board. Mm-hmm. And it brings in a bunch of different nations in the Middle East, and it could be a step in the right direction, although to note, Iran is not in this agreement yet. Do you think this Board of Peace can move this Gaza-Israel deal along?
I think it's definitely, there's no doubt that international forces need to be a contributing factor to keeping up this quote-unquote peace agreement or ceasefire. I think that's undeniable, and there has to be some sort of stronger international presence. But I don't know if I think that Donald Trump should be the leading voice or the leading person in this. I think it was very clear that he was very much after this Nobel Peace Prize, which we discussed previously. And I don't know if I can completely trust that his interest in the Middle East will stand for enough time for this to even develop fully.
Well, we don't really know what he wants, because currently right now we have audio of Trump talking about wanting different interests to come in and buy up beachfront property. We have AI footage of him taking it over with Elon Musk. We're not exactly sure what he wants. There's also audio of him saying, and I'm not quoting him word for word, that he wants everybody inside Palestine moved to a place where they'd be happy. Not exactly sure what that means. So we don't really know exactly what he wants at this moment. I would assume it's changed now that he's more into the nitty-gritty of the process. But that's pretty much what we know Donald Trump wants at the moment.
Right.
Yeah, so again, Trump promised an America First agenda during his campaign, during the opening parts of his presidency. And I'm not sure him being the leader of this is the right move for him. Obviously, he wants the Nobel Peace Prize. He said he wants it. I mean, even if he hasn't said it directly, we all know he wants it. And I'm not sure if him being the leader of, rehabilitating Gaza is the right move. I also have to question, where is this money going to come from? Is this going to cost $70 billion to rebuild, at least, to rebuild Gaza, because the whole place has been destroyed? So it's going to be international money. Is the UN going to fund this, or is the U.S. going to try to directly fund this? That's, again, where I'm kind of concerned with the loopholes here.
And also, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to mention what you said, where is this being funded. Trump has mentioned the fact that the money from some countries like the UAE have more money than any of us can fathom, and that he thinks that will play a major part in this, but who really knows?
Yeah, I was going to say that the White House said that they want to get 15% removal of Israeli troops from Gaza. I mean, I think that's a very ambitious number. I mean, we're looking at 53% right now. The logistics of it are very unclear, and unless the White House is very clear in how they plan on facilitating this sort of removal of Israeli troops and as well as providing humanitarian aid to the Gazans that need it right now. There's a lot up in the air, and I don't think that there's a very clear solution right now, and I don't think that there will be.
Jackson, let me preface this question to you. As Vita's mentioning, there's 53% occupation. They want to get it down to 15%. Is it safe to take out the IDF from Gaza? And I know the IDF has not been anywhere in favor of these people, and they've been killing mass amounts of them, but leaving them astray with a terrorist organization like Hamas, is that the safer option?
Well, I'll give
Yes.
Nick
So
first.
it's gonna put some danger to Israel for sure. But there's always risk involved with these military withdrawals. We saw what happened with Afghanistan in 2021. A military withdrawal is always going to have risks. But eventually you have to take risks to move forward in the world when it comes to wars, when it comes to anything else, any type of foreign affairs. So yes, I do think that yes, the danger level will go up for Israeli troops and for maybe even for Israeli citizens because there's less military presence in Gaza. But we also have to consider the other side. What's safe for the people of Gaza? How are we going to protect those people? So it all comes down to balance, and it all comes down to how do we stop the violence overall.
Yes.
I think we need, not necessarily to throw a direct solution out there, I think we need elections, and I think we need a process established there in Gaza, which finds that a person that wins a popular vote, it could be by a simple majority, it doesn't need to be by a 2/3, not someone selected directly by a Congress like they have in the Knesset in Israel, not someone by like the Electoral College, the way we do it. We need a direct majority of the people to elect a government that has what's in the best interest. We've been saying this since Clinton and the Accords. It hasn't gone through just because of the violence and the diversionary war that we've seen. But the fact of the matter is that democracy on both sides of the aisle, I mentioned this earlier and I'm going to preface this again, is that both Israel and over in Gaza, there is not a government that is popular governing. And that is why we've had this war, because popularity is not governing these two sides.
Yeah, and I think obviously Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt have been very much involved in facilitating this ceasefire agreement. I do think we have to give kudos to their involvement as well. And I think that the Arab presence has to continue in order to, kind of introduce, or not introduce, but to push for this idea of democracy in Gaza. And I think that that is something that has to be very much present, and will any push for democracy will not be successful if there's only Western forces involved in these conversations and these decisions.
And let me close this topic out with this. Trump, this is his 8th war that he claims to be handled.
He needs to get the countries right when he talks about it. We gotta
Right,
work on
but
it.
this is
That's true.
We have to work on that. I'm not good with names, but he might be worse.
This is one of now the 8th problem he's solved in countries that have been at war for many, many years. Right now, we're still looking at the Ukraine-Russia war. If he ends up figuring out a solution, where does that put his legacy globally and just as a president in general?
You're looking at me. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we're talking 50, 60 years in the future, but we have to see if this holds. People thought Bill Clinton was a hero, and 4 years later, we were back having the same conversation. I have no idea, and I don't think anyone else does either.
Yeah, I agree. I think that
No one knows.
it's hard to tell right now
Yeah.
where this is going to go. I mean, I think there's no doubt that, especially right now, people in Gaza, the West Bank, in Israel are celebrating Donald Trump and his administration. I think there's no doubt that this is going to be a very historic moment that will be talked about. But will this last? It's hard to tell from right now.
I will mind you, though, he should be celebrated for bringing 20 Israelis back home to his families and freeing 1,700 prisoners who are held in Israel who say they are Palestinian, who are not given a fair trial. So he should be given credit for that, 100%.
I think that if pending the Ukraine-Russia war ending soon, he would go down as probably the best diplomatic president of the 21st century because his competition is not very well. It's not very good. It's George W. Bush, it's Barack Obama, and it's Joe Biden. That's not a very good pool to go from. So if he does do that, now it is pending, because right now he switched up his entire frame of the Russia-Ukraine war. He used to be kind of like, not pro-Putin, but sympathetic to Putin, kind of saying, let's work with him. Now he's saying maybe not. So my confidence in him to fix that war is going down day by day. But if he does fix that, I would say he would go down as one of the best diplomatic presidents,
So
at
you
least
think
in recent memory.
Your confidence in him solving that war has gone down.
It's gone down since last year this time, I'd say.
I beg to differ. I have reasons. First of all, I think he's more against Putin now, and I think everyone has figured out. It took him a while to find out that the reason why we were in this war is Putin. Putin is scared of NATO. So Putin attacked early, preemptive war, 100%. There's no argument there. Now that he's against Putin, I think there's a better chance that we're able to solve this issue. And now that he's talking about potentially, working with Volodymyr Zelensky directly, now I think we have a better chance of solving this issue. And this guy is just getting more and more experience at resolving 100, 200,000-year conflict. I have a lot more confidence in him internationally right now than I ever have. And I think Rubio is actually very good at his job when it comes to this situation. Other situations, Rubio's been all over the place. Yes, we don't have to get into that. That's why I emphasize and premise this situation. But I think Rubio and Trump they've outlined everything correct here. I don't know where they got it. I don't know if they've plagiarized it, but they seem to have all the faucets in place to get things done. And they seem to understand with Ukraine that Russia's the bad guy.
I mean, I hate to move on from this topic because we could go on for this for hours, but you just said you have a bunch of trust with them globally, but now let's talk
it's growing. I wouldn't say I trust it. It's growing.
But now let's move domestically, where a lot of people have concerns. A lot of people are commenting that we actually need to stay out of all these wars and start focusing on the problems. Inflation's still high, grocery bills are still high, a lot of things that this administration and prior administrations have promised. The problem is we are in a government shutdown, and the biggest concern right now is the Affordable Care Act credits that Democrats want extended, and Republicans don't feel a need they should be had. An important note is that certain sides are actually flipping, where we have John Fetterman, who is actually going more towards the Republican side, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is actually, for one time in her entire political career, is siding with the Democrats.
It's been ongoing, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been a trend with her recently, yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. What concessions need to be made for this government to be reopened?
You
Keep
take that
looking,
first.
keep looking.
Take
All
that
right.
first.
I mean, I'm not in Mike Johnson's head. I'm not going to be the one who goes, well, we all have to sit at the table and talk. I think it goes without saying we need to converse, and I think that healthcare is certainly an important situation, and I think this is going to affect the midterms more than Israel-Palestine is going to.
I don't think that there's going to be a solution anytime soon. I think that Democrats here are trying to make a very strong argument that they hadn't necessarily made in the previous administration. They want to, show Americans that they are kind of getting their strength back. So ultimately, I don't think that there's going to be any sort of solution or slowdown of this shutdown anytime soon. We are seeing, obviously, catastrophic results of this shutdown. 466 workers in the education department have been fired since Friday. It doesn't seem like the Trump administration is going to be budging either. So, yeah, it's hard.
Trump did once say, and this has been viewed many times recently,
Did say
he said that any government shutdown is going to reflect the president. He said that, and again, we're not at the table hearing them discuss, and they claim they're not discussing. They could be, maybe they're not. But the truth of the matter is we got to get this government open, and I don't see when we are, and that's really the unfortunate
Well,
part.
Trump's quote there can be interpreted. It will reflect the president,
interpret it.
but reflect the president to who? Republicans will reflect it on, okay, well, this is him standing his ground. Democrats will say he's causing problems. So the reflection can be interpreted based on who's seeing it. And that would be my interpretation of that.
And to your point, the issue, too, as well, the issue was totally different back then. Right now, it's Medicare and Medicaid. It was a totally different issue back then.
But let me preface something. George Washington, 250 years ago when this government started, on one of his final days, he mentioned that political parties were going to be a downfall to this country and that we shouldn't allow it to happen. Political parties, as we see now in this day and age, are genuinely the problem, where nobody can decide, they can't decide anything other than their party. We're starting to see a little bit through this. But when it comes to healthcare, my biggest problem right now, and it's not just healthcare actually, it's if you're going to not like the decision, so let's say you don't want an extension of these credits, then I want to see an idea. I don't just want to see, oh, I don't like it. Then what's your better solution to fixing the problem? And that is the biggest issue we have in this country, where it's not only that the party doesn't like an idea, but then there's no one coming to the table and saying that's not the right answer, but this is. And
the Democrats did propose $17 billion, but we will.
But I'm saying for the Republicans, if you're going to say you don't like it, then you need to come back to the table and say that idea is not good, but this idea is what we're going to do to help the millions of Americans that are on these credits.
Well, I will say I don't think that kind of logical reasoning is going to be seen in the Trump administration anytime soon. Clearly he's taking what could be considered a very petty approach to this, with nearly $28 billion frozen or canceled that were reserved for 200 projects in mostly Democratic cities. And this is like a very petty approach to coming to a resolution or trying to negotiate. Like, the Americans should be the first interest of the Trump administration, and that can't be seen. And I mean, it's clear that Democrats are somewhat getting the butt of this.
And let me piggyback off of that. The proposed plan is Medicare, Medicaid, and the problem with the shutdown that concerns a lot of people is the powers that the executive office has. For example, i.e. the layoffs.
Yeah, and I was going to say this last week, and I didn't, so I'll save it for this week. Congress needs to go back to elementary school where you learn how to agree to disagree. The fact that that is unable, there was a video that went out with a Republican senator, Republican representative, and Hakeem Jeffries, and they were just talking over each other. And you have Speaker Mike Johnson saying one thing, and the leaders...
Oh, Mike Lawler, yes.
Yeah, and you have Jeffries and Schumer saying another. It's just at the end of the day, nobody cares about their personal opinions. They're supposed to be representing the people, and it seems like they're representing their own ego. They're representing a higher power, and that is not the point of this government.
Couldn't agree more.
Of course, yes, I agree completely.
The special session is in order. Will it ever happen? We'll have to see. 14 days. Today's the 14th day of the shutdown.
It's crazy, and you even see right now the fact that we can't swear in the senator from Arizona. There's representative from Arizona. There's a lot of problems right now that need to be solved, and it's on Congress right now, especially with midterms looming.
We don't make quorum too easily in this Congress, do we?
No, we don't. And last thing to close this out, where do we think this favors in the midterms, the Democrats or the Republicans?
The boys in red. That's who it favors right now. They won the election last year. I can't see why this would hurt them. I mean, I think Democrats are seen as the opposing force causing this, which is why Americans will interpret it that way. So I think it does favor Republicans.
I mean, at the very moment it does, but we do live a 24-hour news cycle, so we'll have to see as we get closer to the midterms. And we'll also have to see how this redistricting battle that hasn't ended pans out.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's hard to tell right now. I mean, right now I agree with you, Jackson. I think that this can be interpreted bad on Democrats, but yeah, it's hard to tell. We'll see.
Well, that is all we have time for today for the politics panel. We will be sure to follow the 20-step peace plan and the government shutdown to keep you all informed when we have more developments. Until next week, back to you, Ginevra.
Thanks, Sam. Now let's head over to Gracie, telling us all we need to know about Jane Goodall. Over to you, Gracie.
Thank you, Ginevra. On October 1st, world-renowned ethologist, conservationist, and humanitarian Jane Goodall passed peacefully in her sleep in Los Angeles, California, while on a speaking tour in the United States. Goodall dedicated her life to service, both through her research and her contributions to society. Her studies on chimpanzees paved the way for numerous scientific advancements and revealed profound similarities between humans and primates. Jane Goodall was a trailblazer in every aspect of her life, even during her final days. Her legacy will be remembered for generations to come. Jane Goodall was just 10 years old when she knew she wanted to work with wildlife. As a young woman, Goodall worked as a secretary and film production assistant until she gained passage to Africa. Once there, she assisted paleontologist Dr. Louis Leakey in his work. Leakey was impressed with Goodall and asked her to travel alongside him to Tanzania to study wild chimpanzees in the forest of Gombe, where she would make groundbreaking discoveries. Her work not only advanced knowledge of primates, but of humans as well. Through her research, Goodall learned that chimpanzees used and modified tools. Her observations debunked the previously held belief that toolmaking was exclusively a human trait. While living with the chimpanzees, Goodall also discovered that they have elaborate social dynamics, deep familial bonds, and experience a variety of emotions, from excitement to grief. Her many findings reshaped the way science regarded primates and unearthed their strong connection to the human race. Jane Goodall ended her direct field work in 1986, but continued her research on primates while also leaning into humanitarian and conservationist projects. She founded the Jane Goodall Institute to improve the lives of people, animals, and wildlife. She also founded Roots and Shoots, a global youth education program for preschool to university-age students. Because of her impressive work, Jane Goodall received many awards and recognitions, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States, awarded to her by President Joe Biden in 2025. She was also named a United Nations Messenger of Peace. Just this March, Jane Goodall filmed an interview with the Netflix series Famous Last Words, which features interviews with public figures that will release after their deaths. In the interview, Goodall reflected on her life and her time researching chimpanzees, along with her thoughts on spirituality and her mission to fight climate change and protect the natural world. She told viewers, even today, when the planet is dark, there is still hope. She encouraged audiences to think about the small actions they take each day if they want to save the planet for future generations. Goodall did not keep politics out of her interview either, expressing her criticism towards Elon Musk, President Donald Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin, Chinese President Xi Jinping, and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. She stated that she wanted to put them all in one of Musk's spaceships and send them all off to the planet that Musk is sure he will discover. After disclosing her thoughts, some of which that had never before been shared with the public, Goodall ended with powerful advice. Looking directly into the camera, she said, "You have it in your power to make a difference. Don't give up. There is a future for you." That wraps up our flashback for this week. Back to you, Ginevra.
Thanks, Gracie. Now it's time to send it over to the history panel to discuss the old and new amendments and debate them. Over to you, Nikolai.
Thanks, Ginevra. Constitutional amendments are fundamental to the democracy of the United States. These 27 amendments detail some of the most important aspects of our nation, from the freedom of speech to the right to vote. However, with there being 27, some are bound to be overshadowed by others, whether due to the time period they were ratified or the purpose of the amendment itself. Some amendments are simply not discussed as much. So to shed light on some of the amendments that may be deemed as forgotten, I have assigned each of the other panelists one of these more forgotten amendments, and they'll be debating in one-on-one showdowns where they'll be looking to show why their amendment is the most important to the history of the United States. Now let's get started by introducing our first two competitors. Introducing first, representing the 18th Amendment, Jocelyn Bilker. And her opponent, representing the Third Amendment, Shay Iyer. Welcome. Now, first, could you guys please do a brief introduction to your amendments?
All right, so I'll go first. So the prohibition of alcohol, the 18th Amendment, basically people couldn't drink, bars were closed, alcohol was not for purchase, hence the barrels of liquor being poured out. And so this was part of the progressive era, about 1890s through 1920s, and it included reform movements that focused on morality, public health, and social order.
And while I'm talking about the Third Amendment, and the Third Amendment talks about the quartering of soldiers in American private residences, both in times of peace and in times of war, without the consent of the owner. So no soldier shall be forced to be quartered in a private residence.
Very good. So I assembled you two and these two amendments because I see similarity and they're both been kind of lost by time. I mean, yours was the only amendment to be repealed, and yours not very discussed as much.
Not at all.
So I want to know from you two, why is your amendment still relevant in today's democracy?
Yeah, so I'd say that the 18th Amendment is still relevant. I mean, we all go to Penn State, right? We all know I feel like it's fair to say it's the party school. We've all drank before, or, those who are over 21 have, I should say. And I feel like it's still relevant because with the prohibition of alcohol, Penn State wouldn't have some of the reputation that it does. So I feel like that's why it's still relevant.
Yeah, but before I get into mine, I just got a quick question, Jocelyn. What are you doing after this? Are you going home?
Yeah, but I'm 19, so I can't drink.
Yeah, you're going home?
Yeah.
Well, what if you went home and you heard a knock on your door, and then all of a sudden you see these military people standing outside, and they just come inside. They're like, hey, we're living here now, and we're not paying for rent, but hey, you gotta feed us. You gotta provide our shelter. You gotta provide our food. And I know that state college rent ain't cheap, and I know grocery prices are increasing. So your home essentially ceases to become your home. But something else that I wanted to bring up was just the right to privacy in your own home. Now, we have seen recently in the news people posing as ICE agents and attempting to enter into people's homes. In fact, we even saw that this happened in the case of the Minnesota lawmaker and her husband who got shot. Someone impersonated a law enforcement officer and came into their house. Now, imagine how much magnified this would be if someone pretended to be a military officer and not only just coming into your house to search it, no, but to live there. Well, good thing we have the Third Amendment, and that cannot happen.
That's a really good point. Yeah. So I would say, kind of based on that, it is important to have our own privacy. I would agree that what you made a very good point there.
Very good. And now we're going to switch over. Let's look at concepts of democracy. What concepts do you think from your amendment are still there in the United States?
Well, I definitely think the right to privacy, just first and foremost, I mean, obviously the Fifth Amendment gives us the right to privacy from self-incrimination, the privacy of our actions, the privacy of speech from the government, and the Fourth Amendment protects us from search and seizures. But the Third Amendment protects us from a fundamental privacy of people living in our house, like military privacy. If we went into marital law right now, well, the military still wouldn't be able to come inside. Now, police can still enter your home. They can still enter your home with a search warrant. ICE agents can enter your home if they have a written warrant from a judge. But the military cannot do that under any circumstances. The military cannot enter your home and they cannot live there unless you consent to it, of course. And I think it brings up the idea of the people being governed, it brings up the idea of the government being governed by the people in a way and really reinforces this concept of consent from the people to be governed.
Jocelyn, your rebuttal?
It's interesting that you bring that up. I was going to say, especially, for example, with the prohibition of alcohol, it's almost restricting people's freedoms to do whatever they want. Their own free time should be whatever they want. If they want to drink, they should be able to drink. If they don't have to. I mean, even like groups such as the Anti-Saloon League and the Women's Christian Temperance Union, were spearheading the prohibition of alcohol. But this also did lead to those widespread speakeasies where people were just kind of forced into this area. Although, again, it's not the same as the Third Amendment, but you do see a lot of these bootlegging and secret alcohol trades with figures like Al Capone becoming notorious in this era. And so to kind of talk about more of like, I guess the cultural and legacy kind of combining with the democracy of it, it really did popularize a lot of different stuff and sparked debates about personal liberty, which kind of goes back to what you were saying, as well as personal morality. And so it was really important to have that idea of being able to express yourself and have your own freedoms and opinions and privacy.
Well, that's all we got, unfortunately. Very good debate, everyone, but I'm going to go off to Shay on this one. Great examples, but you both did very good, so great debate. And we're going to move on to our next debate. Representing the 27th Amendment, we have Tyler Roy. And representing the 23rd Amendment, we have Kara Howard. Welcome, guys. Thank you for being here. Could you please briefly explain your amendment?
Sure.
You first, yeah.
Sure. So the 27th Amendment, I'm going to read the constitutional definition, is as follows. No law varying the compensation for the services of the senators and representatives shall take effect until an election of representatives shall have intervened. So in simple terms, members of Congress are basically, without the 27th Amendment, they're unable to give themselves a salary raise until after the next House of Representatives election has taken place.
Awesome. So yes, I have the 23rd Amendment, and the 23rd Amendment does two very important things. It gives residents of Washington, D.C. the right to vote in presidential elections, and also gives D.C. as many electoral votes as the least populated state, so it has 3 electoral votes.
Very good. So I've put you guys two together because you guys are both later amendments. You're the last one, you're near the last,
yes.
90s, 60s. I want you to go over kind of the history of America and what kind of things went wrong because your amendment wasn't there. Like, what kind of evidence do you have as to why the amendment was better for America?
Right, so to go briefly over the history, the amendment was proposed in 1789, but it didn't initially receive enough support to be passed. So it was actually passed in 1982 after a college sophomore named Gregory Watson wrote his paper on possibly reviving the amendment because he recognized its importance. And he actually received a C. And he took that personally and decided to go off on his own and just write letters and make phone calls. And he got this amendment eventually ratified about 10 years later in 1992. And he got an A+, 35 years later. So
Yeah.
he recognized the importance, and he was able to basically campaign to have it passed. And then he recognized the need for it because without the 27th Amendment, voters would not need to intervene, or would not have the right to intervene at all and give their vote on whether or not any member of Congress could basically give themselves a raise. So without it, Congress could pass a bill to raise their salary without the say of voters, even if it was undeserved. And I personally think that without the 27th Amendment, you can't really define the U.S. as a democracy because you're taking away the voice of the people, basically, with congressional elections. So that's why I think it's important.
Thank you.
Yeah. That was really great reasoning, I'm not gonna lie, but kind of going off of that, giving these people those, that voice in these elections without the 23rd Amendment, over about like 700,000 people that live in the District of Columbia would not be able to participate in the presidential election, which is a lot of people. Those are a lot of voices that are unheard. And this amendment was originally ratified in 1961, which is fairly late. So the fact that, so many people have lived in Washington, D.C. for such a long time, nation's capital, and they can't even participate in arguably one of the most important, political elections, that really says a lot. And even though this amendment does not obviously consider Washington, D.C. to be a state, it still gives it the importance as a state, because it is an area where people reside. One of my best friends lives in D.C. She lives 5 minutes away literally from the Capitol. And I just can't imagine being, that close to something so just important to our whole nation, and then not being able to be a part of something just as important, as a presidential election. Just because these people chose to reside in the District of Columbia and we don't consider it a state, then we don't consider them to be actual citizens. That doesn't make any sense. They're living here in America, they're American citizens, they should get the right to vote in the presidential election, and that's what this amendment does.
Very good. And then, just real quick, what is the overlasting impact you would say your amendment has had on America?
Well, like I said earlier, I think it's really advanced this country as a democracy because it gives the entire. So while I do think the 23rd Amendment absolutely is important, the 27th Amendment really affects the entire American population. It ensures that Congress cannot pass or cannot give themselves a salary raise without the say of the American people. So I think that's crucial. Of course, I think democracy is one of the things that defines the United States. So I do think it affects. Its magnitude is much greater than the 23rd Amendment. Also, I think it definitely incentivizes members of Congress to do their job well, because without the vote of the people approving their potential salary raises, they wouldn't be, the 27th Amendment wouldn't work. So I think it definitely encourages Congress to do a better job as well, and that indirectly does affect the American people as well as every country that has any relations with the United States at all. So. I just think the scope is really, really major for the 27th Amendment, which is, I think, one of the reasons it's so crucial.
I definitely agree with that kind of, like you said, that scope, that outreach has more of an effect on the population as a whole and democracy as a whole. However, without the 23rd Amendment, a piece of that democracy would be missing, because you have a very large group of citizens whose voices are unaccounted for, and obviously it's still being used today because, like I said, my best friend, she's 19 and she just voted in the presidential election, and without this amendment, she wouldn't have been able to do that, just simply because she lives in a place that our nation has deemed to not be a state. So I think that this is very important. It's in use today, and without this amendment, then there would be a very large hole in our democracy because a piece of it would be missing.
Okay, you guys made this very difficult. Very good points on either side. This is difficult. I think I'm gonna go with Kara. I'm sorry,
Thank you.
but wonderful.
Good job. Good job.
Wonderful
Good
points.
job. Yes. Nope, you're good.
Wonderful.
Good job. Yeah.
So, thank you so much, and it's
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
thank you, and it is time for the final round. Shay, come on up here.
Oh.
What's up, Kara?
Hey.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good.
Oh, both wearing green.
Both wearing green.
I know.
Yes, this is a
We planned this.
good sign. Yeah, we did. We planned this. We knew we were gonna be here.
We knew we were gonna be here.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
So this is an interesting showdown here. We got
This is
one of the first amendments and then one of the last
one of
amendments.
the later ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
One very different ideas in each amendment, but
Yeah.
we'll figure out which one's most important.
We'll figure out which one's most important.
We're looking at the scale of American history. Which one, the ideas that it has, all aspects of the amendments, which one is more important?
Well, I'll start off by saying that now this gives DC electoral votes, right? But it doesn't address the issue of DC's representation on a larger scheme. I mean, the presidential election, it's one election, and it's just the executive branch. Now, DC still doesn't have its own senators. It still doesn't have that same representation on a legislative scale. So I do think it, in a way, minimizes DC's representation, and I don't think it's a full representation, and I don't think that impact is as huge for DC as it poses it out to be. Additionally, I'll say that it gives disproportionate representation to DC, whose population is not nearly comparable to other states, and yet it still gets the same amount of representation in the Electoral College. And I think that's more of a problem about the Electoral College, but I still think that's disproportionate.
I mean, obviously, I do agree with you. I'm aware of the controversies of the Electoral College and in general, and even though this amendment only works, as you said, to kind of give DC a part of that representation, arguably, I think that's better than nothing at all, because, you're right, they don't have that representation, in Congress, they don't have, any of those senators or anything like that, but it's still having any piece of representation, and like I said, arguably in an election that is so important, like the presidential election, that's kind of the one that people maybe focus on more. Unfortunately, that's the way that it is. I think even just having this amendment and taking that one step forward is better than just staying put and then almost regressing backwards.
Yes, but like you said, it's just one step forward when there are so many more steps to be going. Meanwhile, the Third Amendment, while it quite literally prohibits the military from entering your home, and I would argue that, again, we see DC representation. We see how ineffective the Electoral College is at the end of the day when it comes to accurate representation. And let's just keep in mind that people in DC still can't vote for the laws or the people that make their laws in the Senate. They have 0 Senate representation. And this is, like you said, just one step. It's a half step forward. Well, I wanted to bring up a Supreme Court case, Engblom v. Kerry. It's a case where during a strike in a New York prison, 2 correctional officers were evicted from their facility residences without notice, and they were forced to be housed there. And the Third Amendment, quite literally, not just enacted on a federal level like you would imagine, but it also said, hey, this can't happen on a state level. These state correctional facilities cannot be used to house the National Guard without the consent of the people living there. So I think when we have something that's not just talking about one state, and in the case of DC, well, DC is not even a state. DC is a territory, and I think state and federal law overarching and protecting us from, government infringement, something that currently is a hot topic in the news. I do think this is very relevant in comparison to just giving DC their, here, take it, you get electoral votes, and quite frankly, the votes, it's not even proportionate to their population. It's kind of an insult to the rest of the country, don't you think?
I mean, insult to the rest of the country, I feel like that's a little bit of a strong word. I mean, as you said, DC is a territory, it's not a state. We, as a country, made the decision to not make it a state, to make it a territory like that. The only reason why perhaps the votes that it get is, disproportionate to the people that live there is because of the guidelines that we set. We stated it to be a territory. And I'm not going to sit here and say that one of our amendments is more important than the other. Obviously, they both have their importance. That's why they were implemented in the Constitution in the first place. But in terms of general relevancy, I feel like the 23rd Amendment is perhaps a little bit more relevant.
Well, is it relevant to the whole country, or is it just relevant to DC? I mean, hey, I'm from Jersey, and I don't, at the end of the day, I know how the DC vote's gonna go, and it doesn't really affect me. But what does affect me, and something that I definitely don't want, is random people coming into my home and eating my food and living in my place.
Okay, I think we have Got it all we got? Let's see.
Yeah.
I think we have a winner. You guys both incredible. Thank you for I signed these amendments. You guys did
Yes.
great work in showing how important they are to our history. But I think the best examples and the best use of the amendment was done by Shay. So
Yeah,
I'm going to give Shay the win,
we'll admit that.
the amendment championship.
That's
but
our panel head, everyone.
Congratulations.
She knows her stuff. Won't lie, won't lie.
It was that summer history teaching.
Summer
Very
history
good.
teaching.
Yeah.
Good job, my love.
Thank you.
Yes.
You did great too.
Thank you.
Wonderful
I was stressing
job,
out at
guys.
one point.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that is all the time we have for tonight. I hope you all enjoyed this debate and learned a thing or two about some of these lesser discussed amendments. Back to you, Ginevra.
Thanks, Nikolai. Sadly, that is all the time we have for today. In the meantime, stay updated with ATD on all our socials at PSU at the desk, and let us know what you want to see us cover next. I'm Ginevra Semprini, and we will see you back at the desk next week.